The mother of a man who survived the Waffle House shooting in Antioch is saying thank you to a waitress for saving her son's life. To show her gratitude, she decided to give the woman a wedding dress.
Between the necklaces, the shoes, the earrings, the racks of dresses, Vicki Davis is surrounded by beauty. It's from here she wanted a beautiful gift to go to someone she just met, but who means the world to her.
I'm a servant of God. I'm not supposed to be here to help people, right?
In April, Vicki's son Michael was at this Antioch Waffle House. A worker named Virginia Stanley asked Michael and his friend to move seats.
She was washing dishes and she wanted the water to get on them. Soon after that, that's when everything started.
A man walked into that Waffle House and began firing shots, killing 4 people. Michael's first seat would have been in the line of fire before Virginia asked him to move.
She's my hero, but she's my personal hero. Yes.
Vicki had a plan. During their annual Gifts of Gratitude, Glitz Nashville gives wedding dresses to veterans and first responders. Vicki, a veteran of the Army, National Guard, and the Reserves, made a special request to give a wedding dress to Virginia. Virginia's fiancé tells us Vicki has given them hope in humanity once again.
I didn't know that, but that's what the mission is. We're out here to help one another. That's all part of our mission, is to be there for somebody else. With prayer, counseling, and God being the healer, she'll do fine.
Adding to that, Glitz Nashville is also giving a free tuxedo to Stanley's fiancée.